Hello, I am Swifto, and this is a test reading sample of a story that I've been working on called Xolia. Today I'm just going to be reading a rough first draft of the first chapter to give people a sort of idea of what I'm trying to go for with this story, and hopefully get some thoughts and opinions from people to see what other people think of it. If it's something I should continue with, or if it's a load of nonsense and I should just stop. But anyway, let's begin. Xolia, Chapter 1. Deep within the leisure sector of the trendy new Aura Alliance space, there lay a beautiful and peaceful diamond in the Car system, the planet Carbolinata. She was a spectacularly sumptuous, crystalline planet, adorned with majestic magenta seas and twinkling forests of crystal and glass grasslands. But the most spectacular sight on the planet was the huge crystal citadel of Jetaquilin, that sat like the central jewel of the planet's sparkling crown, set within the silky smooth, shimmering purple waters of the great glittering ocean around it. There, within that huge, great city of crystal, there was an impressive, spacious room which practically glowed with vibrant shades of blue from the crystal walls, and sparkled with the bright pink light from the pink sky that shined in through the large, arched window that dominated the room. At the centre of this large window was the little figure of Xolia, who leaned on a crystal desk with her head resting in her hands, looking out at the wonders that lay beyond the window. She looked directly down and saw boats coming and going from the Jetaquilin docks, which lay inside the walls of the huge crystal city which was her temporary home. Some 200 floors below her room, traders and delivery services from all around Carbolinata and beyond were coming and going. The market halls, deeper inside the colossal crystal of Jetaquilin, thronged with all kinds of people from all over the galaxy. Tourists mostly, buying all kinds of weird and wearisome little trinkets to take home with them. The crystalline people of Carbolinata excelled in producing dinky little knickknacks. It was about all they were allowed to do, since their military had been smashed and shattered beyond repair by the Aura Alliance invaders that took over the planet 100 years ago. She watched one boat in particular leaving Jetaquilin, a huge cargo ship which looked not unlike one of the little souvenir toys that could be purchased at the market from the distance that she could see it from. The little ship cruised out over the great purple sea that was so clear and calm that she could see down to the very bottom of it with extraordinary clarity. The sea floor glittered with hues of silver and gold as the great Jetaquilin mollusks opened and closed their giant shells in a never-ending dance as they breathed in water and fed on the microscopic metal plankton that carbonized deep under the planet's surface and were forced up in a shimmering dust by the gentle sea currents that made the sea look like it was populated by clouds of solid gold and silver. There were deep-sea divers going down to collect the man-sized golden pearls of the Jetaquilin mollusks. One of the divers had got caught in the tendrils of a giant liquid crystal jellyfish known as a malloc, and was busy fighting a life and death struggle with the titanic titan of the deep purple sea. But Xolia was distracted by this drama, by the glint of sunlight that shone through the window and caused her to see her own reflection. Her extremely bright blue eyes glistened in the sunlight and looked like little pools of sadness in the smooth desert of her beautiful face. Her long green hair seemed to sparkle in the sunlight, and her one nostril crinkled slightly in annoyance at the sight of her own face. She looked away from her reflection and back to the deep purple sea, for now her attention was caught by the incredible mass which floated gently by, some distance away from the ongoing battle between diver and giant jellyfish, way off on the horizon. This majestic gentle giant of the sea was a blowpat, a creature which Earth's nearest equivalent was the blue whale, though the blowpat was very different from an earth whale. The blowpats were also a crystal-based life form, which grew from the naturally growing crystal corals at the bottom of the ocean. Once they broke off from the rocks, they became huge swimming beasts, which fed on the tiny crystal plankton that filled the seas, filter feeding and becoming bigger and bigger until they either became too heavy and sank to the bottom to harden and to rock and become a nursery for baby blowpats, or more commonly, they were hunted down and mined for their precious jewels to make cheap little baubles and trinkets for the tourist trade, which was the lifeblood of the Clarbolonata economy. Xolia watched them as they chimed their great bellowing crystal bodies open and shut to make a high-pitched singing sound which they used to communicate with other blowpats, which could hear them singing from halfway around the planet. A small herd of them swam by, all sparkled with the huge multicoloured jewel stones which covered their bodies in a glitter of gaudy lights. It hardly surprised her that such an obnoxiously valuable animal like that was on the brink of extinction due to overhunting. It almost served them right for being so bling. Beyond the horizon, Xolia could just make out the shimmering mountains of an island which lay a few hundred miles from the city on the ocean. This small landmass was covered in a forest of clear glass trees. You could see the trees for the forest in such a place. Though with a lot of animals adapted to this habitat, it was very dangerous to walk about in. Because everything was clear and glassy looking, you could easily trip over something and shatter it into tiny glass fragments, fall into these glass fragments, and be cut to shreds. Even the fruit that the trees produced were colourful balls of glass, which could drop down and smash your head in if they were big enough. It was very obvious why soft-tissue creatures like Xolia and others like her preferred not to live on the lands of Clarbolonata. It was a beautiful but hellish land to try and colonise, with all that glass vegetation and sharp pointy crystal lifeforms ready and waiting to slice open any fleshy lifeforms that dared enter their territory. Above the horizon, a bit closer to a window, she saw two Ley-Litty birds fly by, squawking at each other. These beautiful little birds were not native to Clarbolonata. They had been introduced to the ecosystem 300 years ago by accident, when they escaped from captivity on board the ship of the notorious space pirate Captain Lob of the planet Sod in the Nob system of the lazily named sector of the galaxy. The birds originally came from the planet also within the lazily named sector of the galaxy. They are of flesh and bone, as are most creatures of the galaxy, with Clarbolonata being more of an exception with its abundant crystalline lifeforms. The Ley-Litty has bright feathers of shining gold and dark green. They manage to thrive on the crystal-abundant planet without their natural food sources, due to the copious amounts of food waste dropped by the citizens and tourists of Clarbolonata alone. In Earth terms, they could be considered beautiful and charismatic pigeons, though they more closely resembled parrots and are considered to be very intelligent birds. Though not intelligent enough to figure out what windows are, the Ley-Litties crashed into Xolia's window with a thud and spiralled down out of her line of vision. Higher in the sky were big pink fluffy clouds, and among them was the long dark shape of a ship coming into the planet's atmosphere to land. It was a passenger ship, bringing in yet more tourists. Tourists who had come to gawk at the strange planet of crystal and waste money on jewelled trinkets made of the living crystal creatures that once lived freely and happily, before the fleshy colonists of the planet decimated their world and turned them into cheap little ornaments, which would no doubt amuse for a few moments before sitting on a shelf collecting dust for the rest of its existence. Ships like these were always coming and going, darting in and about the colourful clouds of pink, shaded here and there with blotches of deeper pink to purple, and of lighter pink to a kind of yellowy colour. You have to be careful if the clouds get too purple, because that means that rain is on the way. And when it rains on Clarbolanata, there's often a chance that it will rain shards of deadly crystal. Just one more reason to stay off the land and keep safe within the crystal city of Jitin Klin, if you were a fleshy creature like Xolia was. High above the clouds now, the incredible sight of Clarbolanata's moon, Cloralco, came into sight. The huge dark orb of Cloralco covered the landmass on the horizon in shadow and was so close to the planet that looking directly up at it, Xolia could see quite clearly the features of its surface in great detail. The high mountains of Coralco looked like huge brown blisters surrounded by a beard of green forest, and the wrinkles of ancient dried-up rivers and fresh, flowing streams detailed the face of the moon. It was all very different from the glass forests and glittering seas of Clarbolanata. She watched as a thunderstorm played over the lush green forest and rained down liquid rain on the moon, high above her head, beyond the pale pink sky that it floated through. She wondered what it was like up there on the moon of Coralco. She had never been there herself, and there were no public ships that travelled there. With its green and brown looking world, filled with the more typical flesh and bone creatures, it was not considered a place of much interest to the rest of the galaxy, when Clarbolanata was beside it with its unusual crystal-based ecosystem. Just above the moon there were the faint flashing lights of flickering blue, yellow, green and red. These were the telltale signs of speed pods racing around the upper atmosphere. They were thrill-seekers who rode the wind currents of the upper atmosphere in a great race around the planet, in a highly dangerous way, avoiding artificial satellites and crystal rain clouds, all for fabulously huge cash prizes. Xolia had been very interested in these races when she had first arrived on the planet, but they refused to let her race without years of practice beforehand, so had to make do with watching the broadcast races on the Visi-screen. Xolia craned her head up as far as it would go now, until she was looking straight up. There was nothing but pink sky now, and then the blue crystal frame of the window. She took a deep breath in and stopped motionless for a moment. Then suddenly she burst out with a loud exhale, and a thunderous sigh echoed throughout the cavernous room that made the crystal walls chime with the vibration of it. All these amazing and incredible sights that she saw out of her window, the wondrous, wonderful things that lay out there and played out their exciting dramas and bizarre lives. She had seen it all so many times now, and it was all so tediously humdrum. In short, it was another typically boring day on Clarbolanata, and Xolia was bored shitless. So that was just a test reading of the first rough draft of that first chapter. Obviously, there are a few things that could possibly be cut down or lengthened, and reading it again, I'm not sure that it quite has the impact that I was hoping for. And in particular, when I first came up with the idea, I was thinking it'd be a long description of all the things she was seeing out of her window, going from like below the water all the way up to the very top of the sky, and all being very like straight, serious descriptions, so that the punchline at the end, Xolia was bored shitless, has like that impact that I was looking for. But whilst I was writing it, I ended up putting in some silly details and little jokes here and there. So I'm not really sure if it sort of lessens the impact of the punchline at the end, or if it doesn't matter. So I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts and opinions and get some feedback, in particular of this thing, which I think possibly might be an issue. Do you think having like jokes and silly things sort of lessens the impact of the punchline, or do you think it doesn't really matter? Or maybe you just think the entire thing's bollocks and they should just give up. I would like to know, so long as you're respectable and give me like constructive feedback, really like to hear your thoughts and opinions. And just as an added bonus now, I want to read an additional thing, something else which I've written in regards to Xolia. This is something which I never really intended to be public, and it's more just me writing things out for myself to try and figure out who is Xolia and what her story is all about. So this is just a little page of describing a few things and getting a sort of idea of where the story is going and what it's all about. And hopefully it gives you a better idea of Xolia and what the story of Xolia is going to be all about. So here goes. It starts off like this. Who is Xolia? Xolia is a young lady of about 18 years old, or at least that's what her galactic pass says, which expired 80 years ago. A side effect of hitching a ride with some dodgy, faster-than-light ships, with incompetent pilots who forget to factor in the time dilation effect of travelling faster than light. She is an alien to us and has never even heard of the planet Earth. Though if she had heard of the planet Earth, she would have been interested in it for less time than it takes her to lose 80 years of her life due to inept space drivers. She has slightly pinkish, Caucasian-looking skin, and could very easily pass herself off as an Earth human. At least she could, if it wasn't for the fact she had very bright blue eyes, which almost seemed to glow, dark green hair, which almost seemed to sparkle in sunlight, and one nostril, which almost seemed to shine when she had a cold and got a snot bubble stuck to the side of it. Xolia is a drifter, travelling from spaceport to spaceport, planet to planet, moon to asteroid colony to space station. She has spent most of her life travelling the galaxy and finds it all so tedious and dull. Her parents were travelling entertainers who were killed trying to entertain the Lord Supreme Iflanantis of the 45th Galactic Nabal Empire on the planet Warfire 5 when she was just 7 years old. Lord Iflanantis was killed shortly after due to the Great Nabal Uprising, which robbed Xolia of any chance of revenge against the mad tyrant. For a time, Xolia stayed in Warfire 5, now renamed Peacekindling 5, as an orphan, but soon left the 44th Galactic Nabal Peace Alliance space in search of fun and adventure. At first she enjoyed getting away from the exceptionally dull 44th Galactic Nabal Peace Alliance, but soon she quickly realised that she found the rest of the galaxy to be as dull, if not duller. During her wild teen years, she turned to a life of crime for a brief stint, in the hopes of finding some excitement that way. She fell in with bad company, namely a big green thug of a brute known as Joltergate. But she quickly became bored of her life of crime and ditched Joltergate in search of some new thing to excite her whims. She drifted for a while more before eventually ending up on a dead-end planet called Corbolonata, with no money and no way to get off the dreary little tourist trap with its exceptionally dull, amazing wonders and spectacularly tedious beauty. Here we find the seemingly perpetually bored Xolia, sulking in her room, wishing for a bit of excitement in her life. Though in her heart she knows that what she really wants is to go home. The only issue is that her travelling parents neglected to tell her where home was, before they were incinerated by the late Lord Supreme Iflanantis of the former 45th Galactic Nabal Empire. In her story, we see her start off in her room, looking out of the window, bored shitless by the amazing sights she can see out of the huge, great crystal city and the purple ocean around her. From there we will see her attempts to get off Clorbelanata as she hitches a ride out of the system into new space to explore. On her travels, she will see many wondrous sights which will completely go over her head and fail to catch her attention. She will run into old friends and foes on her travels, including a rather pissed off Joltergit. She will have some crazy adventures in her travels, including accidentally becoming a goddess of a primitive planet and uncovering a secret plot to begin the 46th Galactic Nibble Empire on the planet Lovecuddle 6, formerly known as Death Strangle 6. Eventually, Xolia will make some self-discoveries, and hopefully she will find something in this universe worth caring about. Will she finally learn to appreciate the beauty and wonder of the galaxy and learn to care once more? Become a more thoughtful and well-rounded person, or will she just become bored again and learn nothing from her travels? And if you would like to find out if she does, please help support me in my writing efforts by liking, subscribing and commenting on this video if you desire to do so. But if not, then no worries, obviously. I'm not going to force anyone to do anything, it's entirely your choice. But if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my weird, stupid writing. Hopefully you got some sort of entertainment out of it. But that is it for now. I would really appreciate any feedback, and if not, then have a good life. Farewell.